Picture this. You wake up at 4 a.m. Your bed is a lice-infested blanket on the ground. You haven't showered in 3 weeks. Breakfast is beans, again, and your entire workday consists of chasing 3,000 stampeding animals through rattlesnake country in 100-degree heat, while someone might literally be trying to kill you. Oh, and you're getting paid the modern equivalent of $500 a month for the privilege. That wasn't punishment. That was just the average Tuesday for a cowboy in the American Wild West. And the crazy part? Men lined up for this job. Today, we're going to find out exactly why and exactly what it cost them. Let's start with sleep, because everything about a cowboy's life makes a lot more sense once you understand just how exhausted these guys were at all times. 6 hours was considered a good night. 6. And that wasn't even 6 straight hours. Cowboys slept in shifts of 2 to 4 hours at a time, rotating watch duty through the night to guard the herd. Their beds were called bedrolls, which sounds almost cozy until you find out cowboys had a nickname for them: crumb incubators. That's because they were absolutely riddled with lice. No mattress, no pillow, no box spring, just a dusty, bug-infested roll of fabric between you and the cold, hard ground. And these same bedrolls went everywhere, out on the trail, back on the ranch, month after month. Now, before you judge them too harshly, just remember, we've got people in 2024 who splash 3 seconds of tap water on their hands and call it washing up. Imagine trying to convince a sun-baked, leather-skinned cowboy to air out his bedroll after a 14-hour cattle drive. It wasn't happening. Here's something the movies never quite capture: the sheer, relentless, suffocating presence of dirt. Cowboys who rode at the back of the herd spent their entire day inside a thick cloud of dust kicked up by thousands of hooves. All day, every day. The guys riding up front had it marginally better, but the American West, with its blazing sun, howling winds, and zero air conditioning, was essentially a war between man and dirt was winning. Some cowboys didn't even bother with bunkhouses on the ranch. The real ones, the ones who took the cowboy identity seriously, slept outside under the open sky. No roof, no walls, just them, their bedroll, their horse, and whatever was crawling around in the dark. Now, this is the part that doesn't get nearly enough attention: cowboy slang. Because these guys didn't just have a job, they had an entire language, and it is spectacular. When a cowboy had stomach trouble, which, given the diet of beans, bacon, and questionable water, was constantly, he might announce to the group that he had the blam jam backdoor trots. When one cowboy was annoyed at another, he'd tell him to go boil his shirt. And if you had a cyst on your wrist, the accepted medical treatment was to find the heaviest book available, usually a Bible, and smack it as hard as you could. They called it a Bible bump. Was it effective? Absolutely not. Did they keep doing it anyway? 100% yes. The cowboy language was this incredible mix of Spanish, Native American words, regional slang, and creative profanity that somehow produced phrases human beings haven't used since. And honestly, that's a loss for all of us. Here's something that surprises most people. Cowboys were actually pretty deliberate about what they wore. Not for fashion, for survival. Every single piece of clothing served a purpose. Blue jeans or canvas trousers because they could take a beating. A tough, durable shirt, one you'd be wearing every single day so it had better hold up. Chaps worn over the pants to protect your legs from thorns, brush, scorching wind, and rattlesnakes. A bandana that could be pulled up over your face when the dust got so thick you couldn't breathe. And the hat. The bigger, the better. More brim meant more shade, and in the desert, shade was the difference between functioning and dying. Then there were the boots, narrow-toed, high-heeled, knee-high leather. That heel design wasn't for aesthetics. It locked your foot securely into the stirrup so you didn't go flying off the horse every time it spooked. And if you wanted to add spurs, called hell-rousers in cowboy speak, those were for directing the horse and, frankly, for looking absolutely terrifying when you walked into a room, People underestimate how genuinely skilled a working cowboy had to be, and it's a mistake. Yes, they roped cattle and rode horses, but they also had to break wild horses, which is basically convincing 1,200 pounds of panicked animal to accept a human on its back through sheer persistence and talent. They had to read terrain, weather, and animal behavior on the fly. They had to understand cow psychology, knowing what would spook a herd, what would calm them, how they'd react to a river crossing or a sudden storm. And they had to make all of these decisions in real time, often at a full gallop, in conditions that would make most modern people lie down and give up. Contemporary accounts praised cowboys for their courage, their physical toughness, their horsemanship, and their ability to endure suffering that most people couldn't imagine. This wasn't just a job, it was closer to a physical and mental discipline. Speaking of horses, the relationship between a cowboy and his horse was something genuinely special, and it makes complete sense once you understand what was at stake. Stealing a horse in the Wild West was punishable by death. Hanging, specifically. That sounds extreme until you realize that a horse wasn't just transportation, it was your livelihood, your protection, your only real advantage over the landscape trying to kill you at every turn. Cowboys depended on their horses for everything, traveling between towns, guarding the herd, hauling supplies, escaping danger. The best horses, the calm, steady, reliable ones that seemed to understand cattle almost as well as the cowboys did, were kept in a special group called the remuda, and the cowboys cared for these animals with a level of tenderness that would surprise you. These weren't tools, they were partners. Now we need to talk about the thing every cowboy feared most, because it makes everything else on this list look like a minor inconvenience. The stampede. 3,000 cattle suddenly deciding to run in one direction at full speed, and it was your job to stop it. What could trigger a stampede? Almost literally anything. A gunshot, a crack of thunder, a snake. According to one account, a particularly aggressive fart once did it. Once the herd was moving, cowboys had to race their horses to the front of the thundering mass, past it, alongside it, and try to turn the leaders in a wide circle to slow the momentum. The problem is that while you're doing this, you're riding alongside thousands of pounds of terrified beef in total darkness, at full speed, on terrain you can't see. If your horse trips, you're done. If you fall, you're done. In 1876, Cowboy Teddy Blue witnessed a man and his horse get caught in a stampede. He wrote afterward that the horse's ribs were scraped completely bare, and both horse and rider were pressed into the ground, flat as a pancake. That was the job. Every single drive carried that risk. Cowboys made between $25 and $40 a month, somewhere around $500 to $800 in today's money. For single men with no rent and no family to support, it was workable. They saved up, spent their earnings in town on baths, food, and a good time, and the ambitious ones eventually bought their own land and cattle. What most people don't know is that the American cowboy, as we know him, didn't come from European settlers, he came from Mexico. In the 1700s, vaqueros, from vaca, the Spanish word for cow, were Mexican cattle herders hired by Spanish ranchers who had already developed the entire system of roping, herding, and riding that cowboys would later become famous for. By the 1800s, waves of European immigrants and African American and Native American workers joined the vaquero tradition and learned directly from them. And here's the remarkable part. On the trail and on the ranch, cowboys were paid equally regardless of race or background. Not because the era was progressive in any broader sense, but because when you're all facing the same snakes, the same heat, and the same stampedes, nobody cares much about anything else. After all of that, the dust and the danger and the dysentery, evenings around the campfire were when you finally saw the human side of these men. Cowboys told stories, cracked jokes, played fiddles and harmonicas, and genuinely looked out for one another. When they were on night watch over the cattle, they'd talk to the herd softly, or sing made-up songs to keep them calm, and keep themselves sane during long, lonely hours in the dark. A cowboy who could sing was expected to, because boredom on the trail was its own kind of enemy, and music was the cheapest solution available. So, would you want to be a cowboy? 6 hours of broken sleep, one set of clothes, beans 3 times a day, and a very real chance of being flattened by a stampede. No shower for weeks, lice in your bedroll, and $500 a month for all of it. And yet, somehow, this life produced some of the toughest, most capable, and most genuinely skilled people in American history. Maybe there's something to be said for a life where soft options simply don't exist. Drop a comment below. Honestly, could you have handled it? And if you want more stories about the parts of history nobody bothers to tell you, subscribe and hit the bell. We've got plenty more where this came from.